up front in the sanctuary, they had the Blessed Mother's altar, and then there was a statue, I think it was St. Patrick, that was in the church, and St. Joseph on that side, and I can't remember which saint was on this other side.
Okay, so that's been changed then.
Yeah, and they used to have on the sides of the church, you know where the piano sits now? Okay, just about in that area, they had an altar, and I can't remember the saints though. And then across the church, there was another side altar.
Okay.
And once in a great while, they would say Mass there. Like on, I think it was All Souls Day, the priest could say 3 Masses a day.
Okay.
So then they would be using most of those altars.
Okay.
And the confessionals, they were pretty much where the confessional is now that they use, but they used to have one across the church where the Shrine of the Sacred Heart is now.
Right.
That used to be a confessional. And in the back of the church, where the big restroom is, that used to be all stones and everything, and it was like a grotto of
Okay.
the Blessed Mother.
Okay.
And it had Saint Bernadette kneeling at the foot of it.
Okay.
And I can't remember why they finally took that out, I think. Probably to put the restroom.
How has the church changed over the years since you joined? And you can, I guess in part that would be St. Joe's, but also the Catholic
overall
Church, right? And how that was represented here at St. Joe's.
I think a lot of it, I could actually see the transition in the way that St. Joe's interior changed. When we first started coming here, every little niche had a statue. And at the St. Patrick statue, there was a green candle. At the Sacred Heart statue, there was a red candle. At the Blessed Mary Virgin, there was a blue candle. But there were statues all around the church, from up on the altar, all around the side. And over the years, as the church was redecorated and repainted, a lot of those little symbols and those little, if you want to say, cutesy or Chotsky kind of things, slowly disappeared. So some of that heavy devotion and some of those devotions that people were doing back when we were doing the Mass in Latin and those kind of things slowly got moved away, so you don't see as much of that anymore.
Are there any other interesting stories about St. Joe's that you've thought of that you'd want to share with us here?
Interesting stories. Well, a lot of times people understand or may understand the history of this physical plant of the church building next door. And they may understand that the original church was located more over to the corner in a small building that was then torn down, and the new one was built in the same location as our present church, then torn down. This building was built in the early 30s. As a result of being the chair of the maintenance committee for, 5 or 7 years, something like that, I ended up in all sorts of different places in that building that I never ever imagined being.
Right.
And I know sometimes now with the religious ed classes and stuff, they may take them down in the basement and show them where the pillars of the original building are, and where
Simon's buried.
where they think Father Simon is buried. We just know it's in that area. We don't know where. But as we were renovating the church, and that's another story in and of itself. Back when we could not use the word renovation because we actually we went against archdiocesan rules and regulations. We operated on the this is when Father Terry was here. We operated under the philosophy that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And so we never called what we did a renovation. It was a restoration. Because you have to ask permission to renovate. To restore something, you don't.
Right.
So that's what we did. Or that's the way we operated. But then, in order to determine whether or not we could put in air conditioning and make some of the other changes, I spent more time up in the false ceiling of that church than I had ever anticipated, and was unaware of what it was like up there. And then going back to changing light bulbs and doing a whole variety of things.
Roof, though.
Right. Again, I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fact that what they're looking at, the ceiling is a false ceiling, and that the roof of the church in some places is 20 feet away from that, and there's a whole iron superstructure up there, and you can get really dirty up there because the whole area is still caked in the soot from the fire in the 1930s. As a matter of fact, there are still remnants of the air handling system that used to be up there that, I mean, they would have to tear a hole in the ceiling or the roof in order to get it out, so that's why it's still there. And then we ended up renovating the entire church. And then another big event and memorable thing, which is one of those that I will never ever do again and has nothing to do with age, is while Father Martin was still here, we ended up having to replace the slate roof. And I had to go up onto the roof with the roofing contractor and the inspector from the insurance company. And
When he came down, white as a board, he said to me, I didn't realize it was that steep, just looking up at it.
Yeah.
He said, it's awful.
yeah, because if you look at at any of the home fix-it programs now,
Right.
the guys go up there and they're wearing safety harnesses and so on. We had nothing. And we're walking
Including
along,
brains.
yeah, including brains, and walking along that roof, which is really high up, and not realizing how much grit and grime and slippery it could be. But we had to walk all the way down to the false front of the church to see where it was leaking and what needed to be done for tuck pointing. And so and again, crawling up in bell towers full of
Bats.
bird and bat deposits
Right.
and all sorts of things. It's been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I've given tours up there to new priests as they've come in.
Because they don't understand.
The last one was Father Richard. I have no idea if any of the others have ever been up there, but they've not been led by me. So.
Right.
I think there were two bells. One was real big and one was smaller. And the big bell was quite heavy. And if you tried to ring it, then you might go back up a little bit with it. But I don't remember how many years they had that.
And who would ring that prior to Mass? Would it be the altar boys or a priest or someone else who would ring the bells?
I don't really remember who rang that, but I do know sometimes when there was a funeral that the kids would ring the small bell,
Okay.
toll the small bell.
Okay. Where were the ropes for that? Were they on the main floor, or were they up in the choir loft, or
The what?
where were the ropes that you'd have to
Oh,
pull?
they hung down right to the ground floor.
Okay. Right by the front door there? Were they, or are they off to the side?
Yeah, there, we're back to the restroom.
Okay.
They didn't have that small restroom there,
Right.
and the ropes came down from the choir loft. There was
Okay.
a hole in the floor or the ceiling or something, and
Okay.
it just hung down.
Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other thoughts about St. Joe's or?
I know when Maria went to St. Mary's up at Notre Dame, I went to a church of Loretto there, and they had beautiful doors, and we put those doors here on this church.
Oh,
I wanted to have those doors. I don't think they duplicated them completely, but Father Terry was here when we put those on.
So the next question we have is about how the church has changed over the years in terms of St. Joe. So one of the things would be that the school is no longer here.
Right, and when I went through school here, you had to have your head covered when you went to Mass. There was an altar rail, and you knelt down behind the altar rail. Yeah, and then just gradually we lost those things. I think there was a great reverence at that time. You know, you wouldn't dare come to church in shorts.
Right.
I think the dress code was a little different, but, you know, that doesn't mean the people them are any holier or more devout than the people now. It's just times have changed.
Right.
That was one of the big, and the priest faced the altar. I mean, his back was to the people.
Right.
He said Mass on the, I call it the main altar. We didn't
Right.
have the little altar.
Right.
And where you have the ambo, where he reads the gospel from, that was on a big stand. And it was up high.
Right.
It was
Yes.
really elevated up high. Choir was in the choir loft. You
Okay,
didn't have any
yep.
piano down there or people down there. Tilly was the sacristan. She cleaned the church. She got ready for all the masses, played the music, and directed the choir, all as a volunteer and working a full-time job.
Wow. Are there any other ways that the church has changed? I guess some of the things we're talking about is the Mass, the liturgy, ways that
Well-
it has changed.
The parish office building, there was a big door, and on one side was the pastor, on the other side was the secretary and associate pastor. You couldn't go back beyond there because the priest all lived here.
Okay.
And upstairs was their house.
Okay.
And then where the workroom and small meeting room, that was one big room, and it was their dining room.
Okay.
And they all ate in there. Yeah, I was, you know, that was their home.